which is where I feel like the next segment really is going to be probably the meat of our discussion is digital hygiene and toolkit for kids and families, because the focus of this entire podcast is parenting in the age of tech, right? What should parents know about digital safety? Maybe we can talk about top three on your list and like what tools can they use?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously tools I'm gonna tote Ruth, but it's actually been built to help parents kind of navigate that conversation with kids. Absolutely. So I
Mm,
would encourage modeling some of the discussions ahead of time so that you know what kind of responses you might get and actually having that dialogue. Because sometimes we struggle with that, right? Struggle framing the conversation around it. And I think one of the key things that I would argue, and this is something my son and I, in fact, talked about just yesterday because we were talking because he's going to start looking at social media later this year. And I said, honestly, if there's ever anything that happens that you're ashamed of, I don't ever want you to feel like you can't tell me. I will not judge you at all. Right. And I think that when we punish our kids it's parenting, it's normal parenting, right? We
yeah.
have consequences for certain actions and that's normal. But what happens in a child's mind, which I'm kind of playing back on my history, right, was that I felt like I couldn't go to my mom because she might freak out and, um, would basically not say anything to anybody because it's the community here. What would they think? And then, there's my dad who had like super angry man complex, right? And he loved his family. He would protect us with everything he had, but I didn't know what his reaction would be. So it's more that children end up managing your reaction to things,
Mm,
right? And so having some type of a dialogue that helps them to recognize that the situation is much more difficult than they can handle. And as parents, we need to understand how to temper our reaction when
yeah.
things that are not the norm, that we would consider the norm, right? That we find to be, and maybe we've been groomed to think are shameful, we should really allow our kids to have that dialogue with us. And I think the tide is really turning in that. So that's my first thing is to really have that dialogue. And you can always do role play with Ruth to kind of understand how best to approach these conversations. The second thing is just knowing what's on your child's device, right? So, like, we do an audit every once in a while of what apps are on his phone, not because I wanna know exactly what he's doing on them. I wanna understand what these apps are, what are they requesting? So, and it kinda goes into my third point, which is really helping them recognize what the red
Mm,
flags. So, I've explained to him when you download an app in the App Store, for instance, you need to look at what data are they requesting? Is
mm,
it why are they requesting that data, and is it optional for you to have it or not? And if it's optional, you can remove that option altogether and not share it. For instance, if they say, location is being shared, if you're playing a game, is it really necessary for you to know
mm,
my location if I'm playing a game, right? So turning those configurations off, helping them understand what that means, and then just navigating certain sort of conversations, difficult conversations around, there will be instances where people or strangers are reaching out to you. They may even be people that you may recognize, in the past, but what are those flags that you need to look for? If they share images, if they're making you do things. Now, there's an aspect of this that's kind of concerning that we're seeing a pattern of as well, which is where these individuals are targeting certain vulnerabilities. For instance, if let's say, teenage girls, for instance, they love sharing their images on social media like Instagram, for instance.
yeah.
What they're noticing is there's people imitating other females to connect with
Yeah.
them, right? And then same thing for boys on gaming platforms, like Discord, for instance, where individuals are pretending to be their age boys that are engaging with on conversation and things. So just getting an idea of what questions they should ask this person, setting up certain key phrases with their friends that they may know to who to play with, and just making sure that you have an open dialogue. And if you're not comfortable with them playing those and you want them to be able to play those, maybe put it in a public location that they can
Mm,
sit and play in a more open space instead of in their rooms, right?
mm,
So I think those certain behaviors are very important. As far as data is concerned, I would say that's a completely different conversation, right? That's I did a TEDx talk a couple of years ago, and my thing was brushing our teeth. We were told was like the way to keep your mouth and tongue and everything healthy, right? Well, all the germs are everywhere else except your teeth in your mouth. And so the data that we're talking about here is everywhere, right? It's
Yeah.
everywhere. And so how do you ask for that data to be removed? So let's say, you were younger, you had a bunch of apps that you were using, go do an audit, right?
Hmm.
Not using any of those apps, you're not using any of those services, those retailers, et cetera, request that data to be taken off from their
Hmm.
website. Or if your kids were going to a specific daycare or specific program online, you can actually call them and say, "Hey, I don't use your service anymore. Please remove my child's information. I don't want to have that anymore." Right? So there's different policies, and modeling good behavior around that for yourself is also very important. Like, don't be on the phone all the time. That's very addictive, but it's definitely important to model that behavior as well.